The Voting Rights Act of 1965 by Elizabeth Garcia,
Adele Candle,
Yuretsin Muron.
and Samuel Boyinas.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 gives people of different national backgrounds the right to vote. This was a step in the right direction to equality because it gave American citizens who were discriminated against the right to speak up about who they would want to lead their country.
The civil rights movement, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., grew stronger, focusing on ending racial discrimination in areas like voting. In the South, African Americans faced barriers like literacy tests and poll taxes, preventing them from voting. The movement called for federal action to protect voting rights.
After the violence in Selma, many people were angry and wanted something to be done. The brutal attacks on marchers were shown on TV, and this made even more people support the cause. President Lyndon B. Johnson saw this and promised to help. He said he would push for a law to protect voting rights and stop the unfair practices that kept African Americans from voting, especially in the South.
This is an unlawful assembly. You are to disperse. You are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church. This march will not continue. Troopers here, advance toward the group. See that they disperse.
On March 15, 1965, President Johnson delivered a powerful speech to the Congress, calling for a new voting rights law. In his speech, he emphasized that the government must act to secure the right to vote for all Americans regardless of race. His words, "We shall overcome," became a rallying cry for the civil rights movement.
And the harsh judgment of history on our acts. But even if we pass this bill, the battle will not be over. What happened in Selma is part of a far larger movement which reaches into every section and state of America. It is the effort of American Negroes to secure for themselves the full blessings of American life. Their cause must be our cause too. Because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
On March 21st, a second Selma to Montgomery march took place, this time with federal protection. Thousands of marchers, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., walked 54 miles to the state capitol, highlighting the urgency of voting rights struggle. The march further mobilized public support for legislative change.
After months of public pressure and political effort, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law by President Johnson on August 6, 1965. The law aims to eliminate discriminatory voting practices like literacy laws and poll taxes, which had prevented African Americans from voting, particularly in southern states.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a major victory for the civil rights movement. It led to a significant increase in African American voter registration and participation. By removing barriers to voting, the law helped empower African Americans politically and marked a key step toward racial equality in the United States.
Even after the Voting Rights Act was passed, obstacles to voting for African Americans persisted. Southern states in particular found new ways to suppress the vote, such as voter ID laws, gerrymandering, and limiting early voting. These measures continue to disfranchise many people of color, showing that the fight for voting rights was far from over.
The role of the U.S. Supreme Court in 2013. The Supreme Court's decision in Shelby County v. Holder weakened the Voting Rights Act by striking down the formula used to determine which areas needed federal oversight. This ruling allowed many states to change voting laws without federal approval, leading to new restrictions like stricter voter ID laws and voter roll purges.
In response to these setbacks, lawmakers and activists have worked to restore voting rights protections. Proposed bills like the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act aim to protect access to the ballot, though these efforts have yet to succeed at the federal level.
The Voting Rights Act was a landmark achievement, but key provisions were weakened over time, especially after the 2013 Shelby County v. Holder decision, which struck down Section 5's preference requirement. This led to new voting restrictions in some states, prompting renewed calls for stronger protections.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a major victory for racial equality and democracy, but the battle for voting rights continues. The Act's legacy is a reminder that protecting the right to vote requires constant vigilance and action. Every generation must stand firm to ensure these hard-won rights are not lost.